By the time the elevator doors slid open on the 42nd floor, Lena Hart's palms were already damp. She wiped them on her jeans once, then remembered the blazer she'd bought at a thrift store and tugged it closed instead. The blazer was a shade of navy that had clearly lived a few lives before her. Under it, her faded gray hoodie still smelled faintly like the detergent samples they handed out in the discount store downstairs. Coal Systems headquarters stretched out in glass and steel around her. White walls, quiet hallways, a wall of windows throwing pale Seattle light over rows of desks and screens. Everyone seemed to glide through the space in tailored shirts and polished shoes. Lena's sneakers squeaked. A receptionist with perfect eyeliner glanced over, scanning Lena's frayed backpack, the scuffed toe of her shoe, the blonde hair she'd wrestled into a low ponytail that morning with a stretched-out elastic. "Candidate for the fellowship interview?" the woman asked, skepticism tucked neatly behind her smile.
"Lena Hart," she said.
Her voice came out steadier than she felt. The receptionist checked a tablet, then gestured toward the glass conference room at the end of the hall. "They're ready for you. That's the CEO in there today." Her tone implied that this was something rare, and perhaps not entirely fortunate for Lena. Lena's stomach dipped, but she walked. Inside the conference room, 3 people sat side by side behind a sleek black table. 2 men, 1 woman, all with laptops open. And at the far end, turned halfway toward the window with Seattle's skyline behind him, stood Jackson Cole. She recognized him from the news feeds they played on the bar TV at the diner where her mother worked nights. Blonde hair trimmed just so, expensive watch flashing when he shifted his hand, the practiced half-smile of a man who had never had to worry about bus fare. Right now, he wasn't smiling. He was looking her up and down. "Ms. Hart," one of the interviewers said, eyebrow lifting before he could stop it. "You found the place okay?" The other man leaned back, a smirk at the edge of his mouth. "You applied online, right? You do have a laptop? Or at least a phone that isn't flip?" Lena's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. She thought of the cracked little prepaid phone in her pocket, the way the screen sometimes froze if she tapped too fast. "Sit," Jackson said, finally turning fully toward her. His blue eyes were ice clear and amused. "You signed up for the Advanced Systems Fellowship. We've had PhDs walking out of this room shaking their heads this morning." He let that hang there like a warning. Lena sat in the single empty chair across from them. The leather squeaked under her weight. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed as if nothing important was happening in this room at all. Jackson slid a wireless keyboard toward her with one finger. "Be honest," he said. "You sure you're in the right interview? This isn't for reception. This is for people who can write code that keeps governments from getting hacked." His mouth curved. "Do you even know how to type on one of these? Or is this your first time seeing a keyboard outside a coffee shop display?" The woman in the middle didn't laugh, but she didn't stop him either. Lena felt the heat climb up her neck, burning the tips of her ears. For a moment, the room blurred at the edges. She saw, superimposed over the conference table, the tiny kitchen table at home, the stack of past due notices, her mother's tired hands rubbing her temples. Reacting wouldn't pay the light bill. She let her face go still, the way she had learned to do at school when kids made fun of the shoes she wore 3 years too long. "I applied to the position that said," she recited, "no degree required. Only the test matters." She rested her fingers lightly on the keyboard. "Is that still true?" One of the men made a small oof sound. The woman's mouth twitched like she wanted to smile and was pretending not to. Jackson's brows lifted. For a second, Something like interest flickered through the condescension. "We'll see," he said. He tapped a key on his own laptop, and the wall-mounted screen behind him lit up with a dense block of code and a short, brutal prompt. A critical microservice is intermittently failing under load due to a race condition and security flaw. You have 45 minutes to identify and fix both issues. No internet. No external libraries beyond the standard set. Lena read the code once. Then again, slower. Thread spun, shared resources, an API call without proper sanitization. It was a mess, but an oddly familiar kind of mess. The kind she'd seen before at 3 a.m. in front of her mother's old laptop, cleaning up open-source projects she'd downloaded just to see if she could. "Your time starts now," the woman said, tapping a timer on her screen. Lena exhaled. The sound of the air conditioner settled into the back of her awareness. The keyboard felt different from the sticky one at home, lighter, but under her hands it became what all keyboards became, a set of doors. She opened them. Her fingers moved faster than anyone in the room seemed to expect. She highlighted the shared state, rewrote the locking logic. She added a sanity check, refactored a dangerously naive string handling section, inserted a validation wrapper where the untrusted input slipped through. No music. No distractions. Just the silent, urgent puzzle clicking together. She didn't look at the timer until she was done. 39 minutes and 57 seconds. She had used just over 5 minutes. Lena leaned back and took her hands off the keyboard. "I'm ready to run the tests," she said. The interviewer on the left frowned. "Miss Hart, you still have." "Run them," Jackson cut in. The woman in the middle hit a command. Lines of output rolled down the screen, each test case turning green and staying there. Then a new set of stress tests launched automatically, hammering the service with calls. All green. Silence pressed around them. The smirk slid off the younger interviewer's face. The woman blinked, then leaned forward as if the code might change if she stared harder. Jackson moved behind Lena, closer to the screen, his expression gone very, very still. "Check the exploit logs," he said quietly. The woman nodded, fingers tapping. "No unauthorized access. Input is sanitized. The race is gone." She looked at Lena properly now, not at her hoodie or her shoes. "I've never seen anyone fix it that fast. We've had senior engineers fail this all week," the younger man muttered. Lena's heart was pounding now, not from fear but from the familiar afterrush of solving something difficult. She swallowed it down, keeping her face as neutral as she could. This was not the time to grin like a kid who'd just figured out a magic trick. Jackson turned back to her, and the way he looked at her had changed. The amusement was gone. What remained was sharp and assessing, like he was recalculating something huge in his head. "What did you say your name was?" he asked. "Lena Hart." He repeated it under his breath, as if testing the weight of it. "The posted salary for this position is $150, the woman began. "But given." $200, Jackson interrupted. "Plus a signing bonus, plus restricted stock at the internal tier." He didn't take his eyes off Lena. "You'll be assigned to a classified program. Long hours. High stakes. You'll be writing code that if you get it wrong, people get hurt. You think you're up to that?" Lena's mind spun at the numbers. 200. She thought of the rent, the overdue bills, the way her mother sometimes massaged her swollen feet in the dark so Lena wouldn't see. "I didn't come here for the snacks," she said softly. A corner of Jackson's mouth tugged upward, not quite a smile. Something like respect, reluctant, wary, moved behind his eyes. "Last question, then," he said. Where did you learn to do that? No degree. No internships. No references in the system. How does a girl with no LinkedIn and a 3-year-old cracked phone walk in here and ace something my staff can't? Lena thought of a one-bedroom walk-up that always smelled like frying oil, of secondhand books with someone else's underlines, of an old, wheezing laptop balanced on a milk crate. In a place where we couldn't afford cable, she said, but we could afford a library card and an outlet. She met his gaze, steady now. You wanted the test to matter more than the resume, right? That's where I learned. For the first time, Jackson didn't have an immediate comeback. He just stared at her, as if he'd been looking at one kind of story when she walked in and discovered it was something else entirely. Outside, Seattle's rain tapped gently against the glass, as if reminding them both that somewhere far below, in a different part of the city, a woman named Emily Hart was wiping down a counter and not yet knowing that everything was about to change. By the time Lena stepped out of the elevator back onto the ground floor, the number Jackson had thrown out, 200, was still ringing in her ears like feedback. 200. It didn't feel real enough to touch. It floated somewhere above her head as she walked past the sleek lobby couches and minimalist art, like a balloon she was afraid to grab in case it popped. Miss Hart. She turned. The receptionist with perfect eyeliner held out a small folder. HR said to give you this. Her smile was different now, less skeptical, more curious. Preliminary offer packet. They'll email the rest if everything clears. Everything. Security checks. Background. Paperwork. 100 ways for the universe to change its mind. Thanks, Lena said, taking the folder carefully, as if it might dissolve in her hands. Outside, the Seattle air was wet and chilly, the kind of cold that crawled through cheap fabric. Rain misted the sidewalk. The tower of coal systems reached up into low clouds, its mirrored panes reflecting a sky the color of dishwater. Lena stepped under the bus shelter and finally let herself exhale. Her cracked phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, thumb lingering an extra second over the smudged screen, and opened her messages. Did you find it okay? Any update? Smiley face. The smiley face was tentative, like her mother was afraid to hope too loudly. Lena stared at the blinking cursor for a long moment, feeling the weight of the folder in her hand, the ghost of Jackson's voice asking, "Where did you learn to do that?" She typed slowly. "Lena, I think it went well. I'll tell you when I get home." She almost added "don't worry" and deleted it. Her mother worried regardless. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. Lena climbed aboard, tapped her transit card, and slipped into a seat by the window. As the downtown towers slid past, their glass surfaces warped by streaks of rain, she pressed her forehead briefly to the cool pane. She could still see the lines of code in her head. It was always like that after a problem, like someone had left a chalkboard full of equations inside her skull. Her mind drifted, following those lines of code backward, tracing how far they went. They led inevitably to the old laptop. The apartment had always felt 2 sizes too small. When Lena was 10, she thought of it as a box in the sky. 1 bedroom, 1 living room, 1 kitchen that shared the same worn linoleum. The windows rattled in winter, and the radiator made clanking noises like it was complaining about the work. "Leave it alone, baby," Emily would say, blonde hair twisted into a messy knot, Cole's Diner polo half untucked as she shucked off her shoes. "If it breaks, we're all going to freeze to death and become sad little ice sculptures." Lena would roll her eyes, but never out loud. She'd pad barefoot from the futon to the small square table where her mother had left the treasure. An ancient laptop. Beige plastic, corners dulled. The kind you only saw in stock photos with bad lighting. Found it in the lost and found at the hotel. Emily had said it casually, but Lena caught the nervous flicker in her eyes. They were throwing it out. Manager said if it boots, I can keep it. It did boot. With a whine and a flicker, it had coughed itself awake. There was nothing on it, no games, no internet, just a sluggish operating system and a browser that led to nowhere. They couldn't afford Wi-Fi. They could barely afford the electric bill. What's the point if it can't get online? A girl at school had asked when Lena mentioned it once. Lena hadn't answered. She'd already discovered the point. At first, she used the laptop the way other kids use TV. She opened the same free word processor over and over, typed stories, deleted them, typed new ones. When the city library started circulating tech manuals and thick programming books, she checked them all out one by one, lugging them home in a backpack that dug into her shoulders. She learned what variables were, then what loops were, then why the word segmentation fault were both scary and weirdly exciting. On nights when Emily was working a double shift, Lena would sit cross-legged on the futon with the laptop balanced on a pillow, the bluish light painting her face while the rest of the room stayed dark. Outside the thin walls, neighbors fought about money and slammed doors. Upstairs, someone's TV blared game shows. Lena tuned it all out, following examples line for line, debugging until her eyes ached. She liked the way code, didn't care how she looked. It didn't care that she wore the same jeans 3 days in a row, or that she knew exactly which end of town accepted expired coupons. It only cared that parentheses lined up and logic held. One winter, the heat cut out for 2 days. Emily piled blankets on the futon, shivering in an oversized sweatshirt with the logo flaking off. Maybe we should all cuddle the laptop, she joked weakly. See if your brain power can warm the room. Lena slid under the blankets next to her, tucking the old machine between them so that their hands brushed when they hit the keys. Here, Lena said. Tell it what to do. Emily blew on her fingers and fumbled over the keyboard, laughing as she mistyped simple commands. I'm too old for this. You're 34, Lena muttered. That's not old. Honey, compared to you, I'm ancient. Just remember me when you're some hotshot. Emily's smile dimmed as she said it, like she didn't really believe the future she was inventing. A rich hotshot, hopefully. So you won't have to live on powdered cheese. Lena's jaw tightened. She didn't like the way the word rich sounded like something that belonged to other people, like the neighbors upstairs or the men in suits that sometimes came into the diner and never left a tip. Maybe, Lena said, instead of just remembering you, I'll make enough so you can stop working nights at that stupid place. Emily glanced over, startled by the sharpness in her voice, then softened. She reached out and brushed a stray blonde strand away from Lena's cheek. You've always been scary when you get that look, she murmured. Like you're about to rearrange the whole world because it didn't ask what you wanted first. Someone should, Lena said. Years slid by, measured in overdue notices and new library cards. Lena finished high school with decent grades and zero illusions. College brochures went straight to the trash. Financial aid calculators online made her stomach hurt. She did freelance gigs under a fake profile, cleaning up code for strangers who never knew she was a teenager hunched over a fraying power cable. Sometimes they paid late. Sometimes they didn't pay at all. Maybe you should get a steady job for now, Emily suggested one night as she peeled off her greasy work shirt, voice careful. Just until we catch up on the rent. Something with a uniform and tips. You can always go back to our computer things later. Lena stared at the laptop screen, jaw clenched. On it, a tech news article glowed. Average software engineer salary hits new high. How much did you make today? Lena asked quietly. Emily hesitated, then gave a number that made Lena's throat tighten. It was the same number she'd seen years ago, when she was still shorter than the counter. Lena didn't say anything else. She just turned back to the article. A few days later, she saw it. An announcement embedded halfway down a government tech blog, a joint initiative called the National Infrastructure Cyber Fellowship, hosted in partnership with Coal Systems and other key industry leaders. No degree required. Open to candidates from all backgrounds. Admission based on an in-person technical assessment and security suitability screening. The pay listed made her vision blur for a second. It felt like someone had opened a door in the wall she'd been pressing against her whole life. She printed the posting on the library printer, the cheap ink smudging slightly where her fingers gripped the page. That night, she set it on the table in front of her mother. Emily read it twice, lips moving silently. This is government-level stuff, baby. High stakes. And Coal Systems, that's that big blonde guy from the news, right? The one with all the satellites, or whatever. Lena shrugged, pretending indifference. He runs part of it. Doesn't matter who he is. They said the test is what matters. I can do the test. Emily's eyes searched her face. And if you don't, Lena swallowed. She thought of powdered cheese and the radiator and the way Emily sometimes stared at her reflection in the microwave door like she was trying to remember who she used to be. Then I'll find another way, Lena said. Pride stiffened her spine. But I'm not putting on a polo shirt and smiling at guys who don't tip while my brain rots. Emily flinched slightly, wounded. I'm not rotting. Lena closed her eyes for a heartbeat.
Too sharp. Too mean.
The words had come out wrong, twisted by the same desperation that had been living in her since she realized what code could buy. I didn't mean. I know what you meant. Emily forced a smile, but her eyes were wet. She reached out and covered Lena's hand with her own. I also know you're better than this place. So if you want to go sit in some fancy tower with people who think they're better than you go. And when they underestimate you, her smile turned fierce. You remind them exactly who they're dealing with. Lena nodded, throat thick. Later, alone on the futon with the old laptop humming softly, she pulled up the few public problems from previous years' tech fellowships. They were difficult. They were ugly. They were beautiful. She studied until the edges of the screen blurred and the radiator stopped making sense. And when her eyes finally closed, the code followed her into sleep. Now, on the bus rolling away from the glittering facade of Coal Systems, the memory slid into place like a puzzle piece. She had done exactly what she set out to do. Walked into the tower, sat in front of their perfect machines, and proved she deserved to be there more than half the people in suits. But as the bus lurched toward their neighborhood, the glass tower shrinking in the distance, a sour, familiar thought crawled up her spine. They can still take it away. A failed background check. A security concern. An arbitrary decision. She tightened her grip on the folder. Whatever happened next, one thing was clear. The old laptop and that cramped apartment had gotten her this far. They had built a version of her that could walk into a room full of people who laughed at thrift store blazers and make them shut up with 40 lines of code. She wasn't about to let anyone, not even a blonde billionaire with a smirk, turn her back into a scared kid in a too small box in the sky. The call came 2 days after the interview, while Lena was rinsing dishes in the sink and pretending not to count tips in her head. Her phone buzzed against the counter. The caller ID just said unknown. She dried her fingers on a thin towel and picked up. Hello. Is this Lena Hart? A brisk woman's voice, professional and warm in the way people practiced. Yes. This is Dana from Cole Systems Talent and Security. I'm following up on your fellowship offer. Lena's heart stuttered. Her eyes flicked to the folder on the table, edges already softening from how many times she'd picked it up and put it down. Okay, she said, steady. We're moving forward, Dana continued. Your technical evaluation scored at the highest tier. A tiny smile crept into her tone. Mr. Cole was very impressed. Lena tried not to think of Jackson's face as he watched the test output go green. That's good to hear. There is one more step before everything can be finalized. Papers rustled on the other end of the line. Because this fellowship is tied to sensitive government infrastructure, we need an in-person verification with a close family member or legal guardian. Think of it as a deeper layer of background confirmation. Lena frowned. You mean like my mom? If she's your primary contact, yes. We'll need to confirm identity, some history, just to tighten security. It's standard for candidates without long employment or academic records. Her gaze slid toward the bedroom door, cracked open. She could hear the faint television from inside, some rerun her mother watched half asleep on her day off. Okay, Lena said slowly. I can bring her. Great. Mr. Cole has actually asked to sit in briefly to personally welcome you to the program. That's unusual in a good way. Dana chuckled. Does tomorrow at 10 a.m. work? The idea of Jackson Cole in the same room as her mother, Emily in her faded diner shirts and worn sneakers, made Lena's stomach twist. Two different worlds crashing into each other. But this was the door. She wasn't about to ask it to move. Yes, she said. We'll be there. You don't have to come if you're tired, Lena said later, leaning against the bedroom doorframe. Emily sat on the edge of the bed in an oversized t-shirt, fingers rubbing slow circles into her calves. Her blonde hair was loose, falling over her shoulders in waves Lena only ever saw on days off. What? And miss my baby getting her spy job? Emily snorted. No way. It's not a spy job, Lena muttered. It's just cyber stuff. Infrastructure. Firewalls. Sounds like spying for computers. Emily pushed herself up with a small grunt. What do I even wear to a place like that? They're going to see right through my bought this for a wedding once dress. You look fine in anything, Lena said, and for once she meant it without effort. They're just going to ask you boring questions. Name, address. Has your daughter ever committed international crimes? Emily laughed, but her face grew more serious. They really need to meet me? Seems intense. It's security, Lena said. She didn't mention the line Dana had slipped in about no degree, limited history. Just don't undersell yourself, okay? You raised me. That's a pretty decent reference. Emily's eyes softened. Look at you, all grown and bossy. She hesitated, then added lightly, Cole Systems. That's the one with the blonde guy, right? From the articles. What's his name again? Jackson Cole, Lena said.
Yeah.
As she said it, Emily's expression shuddered for a fraction of a second, like a curtain twitching and closing. Right, Emily murmured. Jackson. You okay? Lena asked.
Yeah.
Emily's smile was quick and practiced. Just tired. Too many Jacksons in my past, that's all. Lena let it go. Her mother almost never talked about old boyfriends, and when she did, it was in vague, half-joking references. There were always more pressing problems to deal with than ghosts from before Lena was born. They rode the light rail into downtown the next morning, both wearing their best versions of professional. Lena had the same navy blazer and hoodie, but she'd ironed the hoodie for the first time in its life and pulled her blonde hair into a neater ponytail. Emily wore a simple black dress that hit just below her knees, a cardigan that had begun to pill at the cuffs, and flats she only took out for funerals and holidays. On the train, Emily kept smoothing her dress, palms skating over the fabric like she could iron out her nerves with motion. "You know," she said, eyes on the blurred buildings outside, "when I was your age, the fanciest building I'd ever been in was a hotel lobby I was cleaning." She laughed softly. "Back then, if somebody had told me my kid would be going into some government thing with a billionaire, I would have asked what sitcom they were watching." Lena nudged her shoulder gently. "We're not watching. We're in it." Emily smiled at her, pride shining through the worry. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I guess we are." Dana met them in the lobby, all sleek bob and clipped ID badge, and led them through the security gates. She spoke mostly to Lena, but every so often her gaze flicked to Emily, measuring, cataloging. "We'll just do a quick identity check," she said as they stepped into the elevator. "Confirm a few personal details. Mr. Cole will drop by for a moment. It's not an interrogation," she added, catching Emily's tense shoulders. "He likes to meet exceptional candidates." Emily gave a tight smile. "Well, that's her," she said, nodding at Lena. "I'm just the ride." As the elevator ascended, Dana pressed a button for the familiar 42nd floor. "Mr. Cole?" Emily repeated softly, barely audible under the hum of the lift. Her fingers twisted in the strap of her purse. The name settled somewhere behind her eyes, heavy and old, like a book she'd shoved to the back of a shelf years ago. The doors chimed open. The same glass conference room waited at the end of the hall, city spread out beyond like a postcard. Dana ushered them inside. "Just have a seat. I'll grab your file and let Mr. Cole know you're here." Emily sat where Lena pointed, hands folded too neatly in her lap. Her gaze ran over the room, the expensive chairs, the huge screen, the faint reflection of her own face in the glass wall. "You're going to get used to this," she whispered to Lena. "These big rooms. These views." Lena didn't answer. Her pulse was speeding up in a way that had nothing to do with code. Sitting here with her mother, in the exact chair where she'd been mocked days ago, made the room feel smaller. Dana returned, carrying a thin folder. She set it on the table and smiled. "Mr. Cole will be right in." The door clicked shut behind her. Emily's fingers tightened on her purse again. "So, this Mr. Cole, what's he like?" Lena searched for words, landing on the least complicated ones.
"He's sharp."
"Used to everyone jumping when he talks." She hesitated. "He laughed at me at first." Emily's jaw clenched. "Did he now?" "Then he didn't," Lena said. "I beat his test." A spark of satisfaction lit in Emily's eyes. "That's my girl." Footsteps approached in the hallway. Male voices, low. One of them Dana's polite murmur. The other was familiar enough that Lena's shoulders tensed before she even heard the handle turn. The door opened. Jackson stepped in, glancing down at a tablet in his hand.
"Morning."
"Sorry to keep you waiting. I just wanted to." He looked up. The rest of the sentence died. For a long, suspended second, nobody moved. Emily rose halfway out of her chair, then stopped. Her face went very still. The color drained, then rushed back in two bright flags high on her cheeks. "Jackson," she said. Hearing his first name in her mother's voice was like hearing a teacher call a celebrity by a nickname.
"Wrong."
Intimate. Impossible. Jackson's hand loosened. The tablet slipped from his fingers onto the table with a muted thud. Emily, he breathed. Dana hesitated in the doorway, eyes darting between them. You know each other? She asked cautiously. Neither of them answered. Jackson took a step closer, then another, as if drawn by something he didn't fully understand. His polished confidence had vanished, leaving a man whose carefully arranged life had just been yanked sideways. His voice cracked. He swallowed. I thought you moved. I thought you. Yeah, Emily said, and now there was a small, sharp smile at the corner of her mouth. I did a lot of things, Jackson. His knees hit the floor before he seemed to decide to kneel. It wasn't graceful. He dropped like someone had cut a wire, one hand braced on the carpet, the other reaching for her as if he needed to touch her to confirm she was real. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. God, Emily, I was a coward, I know that now, but I looked for you. I swear to you, Emily's chin tipped up, blue eyes bright and hard. You looked about as hard as a man looks for a lost receipt. Lena stared, the edges of the room dissolving. The world tilted, throwing her childhood into a sudden new angle. Her mother, who rarely spoke about anyone she'd dated. This man, who had laughed at her hoodie like she was a joke. Her voice came out small and sharp all at once. What is going on? They both turned toward her. Jackson seemed to really see her for the first time, not as an applicant, not as a talent, but as something else. His gaze flicked from her blonde hair to her jawline, to the set of her mouth that matched Emily's when she was trying not to cry. How old are you? He asked, the question tearing out of him. Lena frowned. 22. His face crumpled for a fraction of a second. He closed his eyes, doing math she didn't have the numbers for. Dana, he said, without looking away from them, voice rough. Would you give us the room, please? Dana's professional mask cracked for a moment, revealing pure curiosity and worry. But she nodded. Of course, Mr. Cole. She slipped out, the door clicking behind her. Silence dropped into the room like a stone. Emily inhaled slowly, drawing herself up. When she spoke, her voice was low, but steady. You don't get to make this big speech, she told him. You don't get to come in here and pretend this is some tragic reunion you had no control over. I didn't know, Jackson said, looking at Lena again, and there was naked desperation in his eyes now. Emily, I swear to God, I didn't know you were pregnant. Emily finished for him.
Yeah.
You didn't stay long enough to find out. Lena's skin prickled. The word hung between them, heavy as a verdict. You. She looked from one to the other, throat tight. You two, you knew each other. Emily and I, Jackson started. We dated, Emily said at the same time, clean and blunt. A lifetime ago. Before he decided money was easier to love than people. Images flickered in Lena's head like someone flipping through channels too fast. The articles about his first big contract, the way her mother sometimes stared at the TV when he was on, a strange faraway look in her eyes that Lena had never been able to name. You left, Emily continued, not taking her eyes off him. You got your deal, you got your exit, and you got on a plane without a backward glance. You changed your number. You changed your address. You changed everything but your face. Jackson flinched at each sentence. I tried to call, he said weakly.
Once. Twice.
The line broke, Emily snapped. Just like your promises. Don't worry, I've heard every version of that story from other women over the years. The details change. The ending doesn't. Lena's heart hammered. Mom, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Why didn't you ever tell me? Emily's gaze flickered to her, and for the first time there was real fear there. Not fear of Jackson, but of losing something inside this room. I wanted to protect you, she said. From this. From him. From thinking a man who walked away had anything to do with who you turned out to be. Jackson's eyes filled with a sheen of something like panic. Lena, he said, tasting the name like it might save him. I didn't know. If I had. If you had known, Emily cut in, maybe you would have sent a check once a year to ease your conscience. Maybe you would have put her picture on your phone between your golf scores. But you didn't. So you don't get to rewrite the past now that she's impressive to you. The word impressive landed like a slap. Lena stared at Jackson, seeing pieces sliding into place. The way he'd looked at her across the table. The weird, searching intensity at the end of the interview. She'd chalked it up to talent. To ego. Now it felt messy, personal in a way that made her want to push the chair back and run. Are you, she swallowed. Are you saying he's? Emily's shoulders sagged. For a moment, she looked so tired Lena wanted to wrap her in all the blankets in their tiny apartment and never let the world touch her again. He's the man I was seeing when I got pregnant, Emily said quietly. He's the man who wasn't there when you were born. You can do the rest of the math. Jackson looked like someone had reached into his chest and squeezed. I never signed up to be that man, he whispered. But I became him anyway. His gaze implored Lena. I can't undo what I didn't do back then. But I can be here now. I can... Lena pushed back from the table, the chair legs scraping loudly on the carpet.
Stop, she said.
They both did. The pressure in the room had built so slowly she hadn't realized how much it hurt until now. Her chest ached. Her throat felt raw, like she'd been swallowing glass. This was supposed to be. She gestured vaguely at the glass walls, the skyline, the folder on the table. My chance.
My job.
My thing. It still is, Emily said quickly. He doesn't get to take that from you. I don't want to take anything, Jackson said. I want to give. And that's the problem, Emily snapped. You think throwing gifts at a wound heals it. Lena pressed her palms flat against the cool table, trying to steady the shaking in her hands. Look, she said, voice low. I don't know what to do with any of this. She looked at Jackson. You were just some rich guy who laughed at my hoodie. Now I'm supposed to what? Believe you're my father? Hug you? Ask you why you left before I was even born? Silence answered her. In the hallway, someone's footsteps passed by, muffled and distant. Inside the conference room, time seemed to have folded in on itself, bringing a cheap hotel room from decades ago right into the middle of a glass tower. You don't have to decide anything today, Emily said softly. About him. About us. Jackson swallowed. But what you have to do, Emily cut in, looking at Lena, is get what you came here for.
The test. The job.
The future you built on that old piece of junk we kept on the milk crate. The rest, she glanced at Jackson, her expression hardening. The rest is static. Lena looked at the folder. Then at Jackson, kneeling on the carpet in a suit that probably cost more than their yearly rent. For the first time since she'd walked into Coal Systems, she felt something like power again, not from code, but from choice. I'm going to finish this security thing, she said. Because I earned this job before I knew anything about you. Her eyes met Jackson's, cool and steady despite the shaking inside. You being rich or guilty or whatever doesn't change that. A flicker of something, respect, grief, maybe both, moved across his face. Okay, he said quietly. Well, we'll do it your way. Emily exhaled slowly, a breath she'd been holding for 22 years without realizing it. Outside, the city glinted through the glass. Buses crawled along wet streets. People hurried to jobs where their bosses didn't fall to their knees in conference rooms. Inside, 3 lives that had been running along separate tracks for decades had just collided with the force of a derailment. Nothing was resolved. Not yet. But the ghost of a man Lena had never known had just been dragged into the harsh, bright light of her present, and he was very, very real. The formal part, the security verification, felt like a bad rehearsal of normal life. Dana came back in with a tight, polite smile, as if she hadn't just left a man on his knees and a woman with murder in her eyes. She asked Emily to confirm dates, addresses, employers. Emily answered in clipped sentences, voice steady, gaze fixed just to the left of Jackson's shoulder. Lena sat between them, every muscle taut. She watched Dana's pen move across forms, the way Jackson stayed standing, hands braced on the back of a chair as if he needed something solid to hold on to. And your daughter has lived with you continuously since birth? Dana asked. Yes, Emily said. There was a pause. The question was standard. The answer wasn't. Then it was done.
Papers were signed.
Copies handed over. Barring any unexpected flags, Dana said, you'll get your formal offer in writing by the end of the week, Lena. Congratulations. She squeezed Lena's shoulder gently. You really did something in that lab. Thank you, Lena managed. Mr. Cole. Dana looked to him for dismissal. Give us a minute, Jackson said quietly, eyes never leaving Emily. Dana hesitated, then nodded and left again. The door shut. Silence swallowed the room. Emily was the first to stand. We're done here. Jackson stepped around the table, blocking the path to the door. Not aggressively. He kept a careful arm's length, but firmly. Please, he said. Just give me 5 minutes. Emily's jaw flexed. You had 22 years. He flinched like she'd slapped him. I didn't know, he repeated hoarse. I swear to you, Emily, if I'd known you were pregnant. You would have done what exactly? She cut in. Sent flowers? A check? Called once a year between mergers. He shook his head, frustrated, words stumbling. I was a mess back then. I thought I had to cut everything out that wasn't efficient or aligned or whatever stupid nonsense I fed myself. I told myself leaving you meant giving myself a clean slate. I didn't think that there is a human being on the other side of your clean slate, Emily said coldly. Yeah, I noticed. Lena felt something hot and bitter rise in her throat. Can we not do this like I'm not sitting right here? They both turned to her. Jackson swallowed. You're right. I'm sorry. He took a breath. Look, I can't fix the past, but I can do something now. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a sleek black card, and set it on the table in front of her as if he were placing a winning hand. Whatever you and your mother need, he said. A better apartment. A house. College if you still want it. Private doctors, lawyers, anything. I have resources. You shouldn't have to live the way you've been living because of my... Stop, Lena said sharply. He froze. The card sat between them, thick and glossy, catching the light. It might as well have been a manhole cover. You don't know how we've been living, she said. Her voice shook, but she didn't sit down. You know nothing about my life except that I can fix your code. Jackson opened his mouth, closed it again. Then tell me, he said finally. Tell me, and let me help. Emily laughed once, a small, disbelieving sound. There it is. There what is? He snapped, frustration breaking through his careful tone. That word, Emily said. Help. You think what you're offering is help. But what you're really doing is trying to buy your way out of the guilt choking you right now. He ran a hand through his carefully styled hair, musing it. You think I don't know that? His voice cracked. I wake up every day in a penthouse I built on top of a life I scorched. I know I'm a coward. I know I left. I know I chose deals and flights and meetings over everything else. But he looked at Lena, eyes bright. She is my daughter. I can't look at her and keep pretending I don't owe her anything. Lena's heart stumbled at the word daughter. It landed differently coming from him. Heavier, complicated, like a coat someone was trying to put on her without asking if she wanted it. Here's the thing, Jackson, Emily said quietly. You don't get to start with that word. You don't get to walk in halfway through her life and claim the role you abandoned. I didn't abandon her, he insisted. I abandoned you. I didn't know about her. Semantics, Emily said, voice turning sharp. You left before you asked enough questions to know what you were leaving. He stared at her, chest rising and falling too fast. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I'm asking for a chance to be here now, to show up, to be in her life in whatever way she'll let me. You want to hate me?
Fine.
I've earned it. But don't. Don't put this on her, Emily snapped. Don't make her feel responsible for whether or not you get to sleep at night. Lena pressed her fingers into the edge of the table until they hurt. Stop talking about me like I'm not in the room, she said again, louder this time. They both went quiet. She picked up the card. It felt heavier than its size justified. Her thumb ran along the embossed lettering, Jackson Cole, founder and CEO, before she set it back down. Here's what I know, she said, looking straight at him. I walked in here with a thrift store blazer and an old phone. You laughed at me. I passed your test. You offer me a job and money I've only ever seen in articles. That all happened before you knew anything about who my mother was, or who I might be. He nodded slowly. Yes. That matters, she said, because it means I earned this. Whatever you feel now, whatever you want to offer now, it doesn't change that. A flicker of pride glimmered in his eyes despite everything. No, he agreed quietly. It doesn't. I'm going to take the job, Lena said. Emily inhaled sharply beside her, but didn't interrupt. Because I need it. Because my mother needs it. Because I am good at this, and I want out of that apartment. Her voice wavered on the last words, but she kept going. But if I take your money, she tapped the card. If I let you buy us a house and cars and all that, it'll never be clear what I earned and what you're paying for. And I will not spend the rest of my life wondering if every success I have is because my father was Jackson Cole instead of because I was Lena Hart who figured it out on a dying laptop. His throat worked as he swallowed. So, what are you saying? She took a breath. This was the choice, and she could feel it changing the air around them as she made it. I'm saying you can be my boss, she said. You can be the CEO whose company I work for. You can be the guy who gave me a shot because I passed a test no one else could. But you don't get to be my dad just because you suddenly want that now. The words hung there, solid and irreversible. Emily closed her eyes briefly, like someone had loosened a band around her ribs. When she opened them again, there was fierce, aching pride shining through the anger. Jackson looked like she'd punched him and dragged him out of deep water at the same time. That's not an easy boundary, he said, voice rough. I'm not asking you to like it, Lena replied. I'm telling you that's the only way I can walk into this building without throwing up. A faint, humorless laugh escaped him. You really are mine, he murmured, almost to himself. That's stubborn. Emily bristled. Don't you dare take credit for her spine. He lifted his hands in surrender. I won't. Not yet. Not ever, Emily shot back. He looked at Lena again. Will you at least let me beat around? In case you change your mind?
Coffee.
Conversation. A number you can call that isn't just HR? She hesitated. Her pride screamed no, her curiosity whispered maybe, and the raw, hurting child inside her hissed you don't need him. I'll take the job on paper, she said finally. We'll see about the rest. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't acceptance. It was a narrow, fraught truce. She would let him into her professional life and keep him locked out of everything else. He nodded slowly, understanding more than she wanted him to. Okay, we'll start there. Emily stepped closer to Lena, slipping an arm around her shoulders. Come on, baby, she said softly. Let's go home. They walked past him together, mother and daughter, a small, solid unit formed in cramped rooms and long nights. Jackson stepped aside, hands shaking at his sides, watching the family he'd never known he'd walk out of the glass room he'd built. He could see the back of Lena's blonde head, the familiar angle of Emily's shoulders. He could see 22 years of birthdays and scraped knees and school projects that he had missed. For the first time in a very long time, Jackson Cole had no idea how to win. Behind him, the skyline glittered. In front of him, the door closed with a soft click. On the other side of it, Lena tightened her grip on the offer folder as the elevator descended. Her world had just cracked apart and rearranged itself. But one thing stayed sharp and certain in her mind. She would step into that job on her own terms. And if Jackson wanted to be more than a name on a business card, he'd have to fight a lot harder than signing a check. Lena got used to keycards and cameras before she ever got used to seeing Jackson's name on the walls. 6 months into the fellowship, she could walk through Cole Systems' security floor half asleep. Badge, biometric scan, a quick bag check, a nod from the guard who now greeted her with, "Morning, heart." Burning the world down again today. Hopefully just patching it, she'd say. Her workstation sat in a glass-walled pod on the 39th floor, triple monitors, a standing desk, ergonomic chair that cost more than her mother's car. On paper, she was still fellow, but in practice, she was the person people came to when something broke in a way no one understood. She was good at this. That part felt uncomplicated. Every time she pushed a fix live, every time a test suite came back clean, she felt a version of the satisfaction she'd had as a kid when she got the radiator to stop clanking by hitting it just right. Only now, the problems she fixed were measured in millions of people's data and millions of dollars. Everything else was the opposite of uncomplicated. Her colleagues, for the most part, treated her like some weird mix of rookie and legend. You're the one who aced the founder's trial in 5 minutes, right? They'd ask over coffee machines and whiteboards. Less than 5, someone would correct, with the reverence normally reserved for urban myths. Lena would shrug it off. Lucky day. She didn't mention the old laptop. She didn't mention the man who'd written the trial standing outside the glass pod sometimes, watching her code with a look she couldn't quite decode. Jackson Cole kept his distance in public. In meetings, he addressed her the same way he addressed everyone else, by last name, clipped and brisk. Hart, what's your take on the load issues? Hart, can we tighten this by Thursday? Hart, your patch bought us 4 hours of uptime yesterday. Nice work. It was almost a relief, that clinical tone. It made him easier to file under boss instead of biological question mark. Almost. Because every so often, she'd step into an elevator and find him already there alone, hands in his pockets. The two of them reflected back at themselves in mirrored steel, his expensive suit, her hoodie under the blazer she still couldn't afford to replace. "How's your mother?" he asked once, somewhere between 23 and 16.
She's fine, Lena said.
"She's working fewer doubles." "That's good," he replied. She used to talk about how tired she was back then. "I should have." "You should have stayed," Lena said quietly. "But you didn't." His jaw tightened. "I'm trying to now." The elevator dinged at the next floor. When the doors opened, she stepped out without looking back. The project that changed everything arrived in her inbox on an ordinary Tuesday. Subject: Proposal Review, Project Sentinel. There was a red flag icon next to it, and Jackson's name in the CC line. She clicked. The document laid out a new initiative in smooth, corporate language, a holistic, real-time citizen risk assessment platform to help city governments anticipate threats, streamline policing, and enhance public safety. Under the buzzwords, the guts were ugly. They wanted to ingest data from traffic cameras, social media, payment processors, school records. They wanted predictive scores attached to names and faces. They wanted to flag abnormal behaviors for law enforcement to proactively engage. Lena's stomach tightened as she scrolled. At the end, a note. Tech lead, TBA, proposed. L. Hart, internal recommendation from executive office. She stared at those last words until they blurred. A pop-up appeared in the corner of her screen. Meeting invite. Sentinel kickoff. 3 p.m. Conference room B/attendees. J. Cole. S. Harper. L. Hart. Of course. At 3 o'clock, she walked into conference room B with a knot in her chest. Jackson stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled to the forearms of a spotless white shirt, tie loosened just enough to look human. Two other executives, Harper from strategy and a gray-haired man from legal, sat flipping through printed copies of the proposal. "There she is," Harper said as Lena entered. "Our miracle worker." Lena took the seat opposite Jackson, the thick stack of paper feeling heavier than its pages. "Project Sentinel," Harper said brightly. "This is big for us, Hart. Big for the country, frankly. We're talking nationwide deployment if we do this right." Jackson watched her over steepled fingers. "We want you at the center of it." Lena flipped through a few pages deliberately. "I read the brief." "And?" Harper prompted. "And it's ambitious," Lena said carefully. "And invasive." Harper's smile didn't falter, but something sharpened in his eyes. "Public safety is different now," he said. "Threats move fast. If we give local agencies the tools to see patterns sooner, we save lives. I know the language looks intense. It's meant to cover worst-case scenarios." She tapped the paragraph about continuous behavioral scoring. "And this?" she asked. "You're assigning risk levels to people based on where they shop and who they talk to online." Legal guy cleared his throat. "The scores would be one input among many. And, of course, we'll scrub identifiers where appropriate, follow all applicable." "It's not just about laws," Lena said, surprising herself with how firm her voice sounded. "It's about what we're making possible. If this gets abused, and it will, people's lives get wrecked because an algorithm decided they looked risky." Harper spread his hands, exasperated charm. "Look, I get it. You're the conscience in the room. That's why we want you. With your standards, we make Sentinel as safe and fair as it can be. Without you, someone else will build a worse version. Jackson finally spoke. Harper. The man stopped, backing off a little. Jackson's gaze stayed on Lena. You're right to be wary, he said. This is powerful. It needs to be handled with care. That's exactly why I want you leading the technical side. I trust your judgment. The word trust landed oddly. It sounded like father language wrapped in corporate packaging. If you say no, he added, we move forward anyway. There's pressure from the federal side to have a prototype by the end of the year. I'd rather this thing is designed by someone who lies awake thinking about the ethics than someone who doesn't. Nice little bit of blackmail, Lena said quietly. Harper blinked. Legal guy adjusted his glasses. Jackson didn't flinch. It's reality. We don't get to opt out of the game. We only get to decide how we play it. She thought of the old laptop, the way code used to feel like a secret language between her and a machine, not a net lowered over millions of strangers. Can I have time to think about it? She asked. Of course, Jackson said. Take a week. We're under a tight timeline, Harper muttered. A week, Jackson repeated. The room took the hint. On the way out, as the others filtered past, Jackson touched the back of her chair lightly. Heart, he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. I'm not trying to turn you into something you're not. A tool, she asked flatly. He winced. Into someone who makes impact at the scale she's capable of. Even if it breaks people, she said. Especially if it stops worse people from doing worse, he replied. There was a plea in his eyes he didn't quite let into his voice. Think about it. She thought about it on the train, fingers drumming against her knee, the city smeared outside the window. She thought about it as she walked up the stairs to their apartment, the familiar smell of frying oil and dust greeting her like a reset button. Emily was at the table, bills spread out, glasses perched low on her nose. Her blonde hair was pulled into a messy bun, a pen tucked behind one ear. You're home late, she said. You eat. Vending machine, Lena replied. She dropped her bag on a chair and sat down across from her. We need to talk. Emily's shoulders tensed. You're not getting laid off, are you? Because I swear to God, if that man... No, Lena said. It's the opposite. They want me to lead something. Emily blinked. That sounds good. Depends on your definition of good. Lena slid the printed proposal across the table. Emily read the first page, then the second, eyes narrowing with each line. So, they want to spy on people, she said slowly. All the time. They'd say analyze patterns to enhance safety, Lena replied. But yeah. Emily leaned back, arms crossing over her chest. And they want you to build this. Yes. So say no. It's not that simple, Lena said. If I don't do it, someone else will. Maybe someone who doesn't care where the data goes or who gets hurt. If I'm there, I can try to make it less awful. Put in limits. Safeguards. And if you are there, Emily countered, you're the one they point to when it all goes wrong. Our ethics lead approved this. Lena stared at the table. The cheap wood grain blurred. I worked so hard to get into that place, she whispered. Every night with that laptop. Every skip thing I couldn't afford, and now I'm supposed to walk away because they finally trust me with something big and it's rotten? Emily watched her, face softening. Baby, she said gently, you didn't work hard so they could stick your name on something that makes you sick. You worked hard so you could choose. Lena's throat tightened. Choose what? Another minimum wage job? Another half-broken machine in somebody's basement. There are other companies, Emily said. Other jobs. Not like this, Lena snapped. Not with this salary. This impact. I can finally keep you from working doubles. I can. Stop, Emily said quietly.
Lena did.
Emily took off her glasses, set them down, and rubbed the bridge of her nose. I'm not saying this is easy, she said. I'm not saying quit and everything will magically work out. Lord knows it doesn't. But I know what it does to you when you pretend something you hate is okay just because it pays well. I watched you grind your teeth over little freelance jobs that were barely shady, and she tapped the paper. This is not little. Lena thought of Jackson's face in the conference room. The way he'd said, I trust your judgment, like he was handing her both a weapon and the excuse to use it. I don't want to be him, she said, voice small. Picking money and power over people and then pretending it was for some greater good. Emily's expression flickered, something old and hurt moving behind her eyes. Then don't, she said. Even if it means you end up back at a kitchen table with me, figuring out plan B on the back of a receipt. The idea of going backward made Lena's skin crawl, but the idea of going forward into Sentinel felt worse. She stared at the proposal one more time. Then she picked it up, folded it neatly in half, and slid it back into her bag. I'm going to tell him no, she said. Emily exhaled, a mix of fear and relief. Okay. And then? Lena asked, suddenly aware of the vast blank space beyond that decision. And then we improvise, Emily said. We've had a lot of practice. Jackson didn't look surprised when she showed up at his office the next morning, proposal in hand. The view from his floor was sharper, the city spread out like a map. His office was all dark wood and glass, and a single framed photograph on his desk turned face down. Close the door, he said.
She did.
He gestured to the chair opposite his. Sit. She remained standing. He sighed. Okay. Standing conversation then. What did you decide? I can't lead Sentinel, she said. I'm not going to build a system that profiles people because it makes somebody's quarterly report look good. He leaned back in his chair slowly, studying her. This isn't about quarterly reports, he said. We're talking national infrastructure. We're talking fear, she cut in. You're talking building a machine out of government fear. I get that it's lucrative. I get that it's inevitable. I don't want my name on it. His jaw tensed. If you walk away from this, you're not just declining a project. You're limiting your trajectory here. You understand that? Yes, she said. I understand that. A flash of something like panic crossed his face. Quick, then gone. You're doing this to punish me, he said. Because of the past. She laughed once, incredulous. You really think this is about you? Everything about this is about me, he snapped, then caught himself. The company, he corrected. The company I built, the opportunities I'm trying to offer you. I earned my place here before you knew who I was, she said. Don't rewrite that just because it's more comfortable for you to think this is some father-daughter drama. He stared at her, breathing hard. So that's it, he asked. You're walking away. I'm walking, she said. Whether it's away or toward something, I guess we'll find out. He leaned forward, planting his elbows on the desk. Let me make you an offer, he said. Different project. Different team. Double your base. You can steer clear of Sentinel if you want, but stay. You are wasted anywhere else, and he looked away for a second, then back. I don't want to lose you. As an engineer. The pause before the last word told her everything. She thought of late nights at the office, of the thrill of solving hard problems, of her mother finally resting on the couch without calculating tips in her sleep. Then she thought of that proposal, of being the one who bridged the gap between intention and harm. She shook her head. If I stay after this, I'm saying I trust the way you run this place. I don't. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since she'd met him, Jackson Cole looked small. Not in size, but in all the ways that mattered. I can't change 22 years, he said quietly. I thought I could at least change this one. You can, she said. By not building Sentinel. His eyes hardened. You know that's not going to happen. Then you've made your choice, she said. And I'm making mine. She set her badge on his desk. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he nodded once, the motion jerky. HR will process your exit today, he said, voice gone back to that clipped CEO tone. You'll get severance. And if you ever want a reference, I won't. She turned and walked out before he could answer. Starting a company looked nothing like the glossy founder stories Lena had seen online. It looked like receipts and ramen and arguing with a bank manager over whether the name Heartline Security was already taken. It sounds like a dating app, Emily complained, signing one of the forms. It sounds like a boundary, Lena said. A line nobody gets to cross. They cobbled their seed money together out of her severance, Emily's tiny savings, and a microloan from a community fund Emily's friend had told them about. Their first office was the apartment living room. The old laptop retired at last to a place of honor on a shelf. A new, still not top-of-the-line machine hummed on a folding table. Their first client was a local clinic terrified of ransomware. Lena cleaned their systems, installed better protocols, and charged them half of what she should have. You're a terrible capitalist, Emily said, watching her hand back part of the invoice. They're a clinic, Lena replied. We'll make real money later. Later came slowly. Word spread. A small nonprofit. A local grocery chain tired of being hacked through its loyalty app. A mid-sized logistics company that couldn't afford a full-time security team. They weren't Cole Systems. They weren't national. But the work felt clean. They made things safer, without watching anyone. On nights when fear curled in Lena's gut, fear of bills, of what-ifs, of the safety she'd walked away from, Emily would sit beside her on the couch, passing her a mug of cheap cocoa. You did the hard thing, she'd say. That counts for something, even if the universe takes its sweet time paying up. One rainy afternoon, about a year after she dropped her badge on Jackson's desk, an email landed in the Heartline inbox from an unfamiliar Gov address. Subject: RFP, National Infrastructure Cyber Defense Bid Invitation. Lena clicked. It was long and full of dense language, but the gist was clear. The government was opening a massive contract to secure critical infrastructure. Cole Systems was listed explicitly as a legacy partner and finalist. At the bottom, a line. Additional invitees. Heartline Security, Seattle, Washington, recommended by former internal advisor. She scrolled to the signature. Samuel Ortiz, Federal Cyber Review Board. She vaguely remembered him, a quiet man at a Cole Systems meeting who'd asked sharper questions than anyone else in the room. He reached out, Emily said, reading over her shoulder.
To you.
To us, Lena corrected, but her heart was racing. Attached was a document outlining the terms. They wanted competing proposals. One from Cole Systems, one from Heartline, and possibly others. Winner takes the contract. The numbers made her dizzy. Emily whistled low. If you get this, it would change everything, Lena finished. And if you don't? Emily asked. Then we keep doing what we're doing, Lena said, forcing her voice to steady.
Slow. Honest.
Small. She didn't say the part of her that thrilled at the idea of walking into a room again and beating Cole Systems at something they believed only they could do. She didn't say how badly she wanted to show Jackson he wasn't the only one who could build at scale. Emily glanced at her, reading her like she always did. This isn't just about money, is it? She asked. Lena swallowed.
No.
Emily nodded.
Good, she said.
Because money comes and goes. What you're really after, that thing where you walk into a glass room and prove them wrong, that's going to hurt either way. Might as well hurt in the direction you believe in. Lena looked at the email again, at the line with Heartline's name next to Cole Systems. The girl in the faded hoodie had walked into a tech interview once and turned a room upside down. Now, a woman with her own company had the chance to do it to an entire industry. Okay, Lena said softly. Let's compete. Outside, rain slid down the window in slow rivers, blurring the city into streaks of gray and light. Somewhere across town, in a taller building with better chairs, Jackson Cole was almost certainly reading the same RFP and seeing Heartline listed as competition. He had no idea yet how it would feel to lose at his own game. But he would. The government building wasn't nearly as shiny as Cole Systems headquarters, but it was intimidating in a different way. High ceilings, echoing hallways, seal on the wall, security guards who looked like they'd seen every excuse in the book. Lena adjusted the simple black blazer she'd borrowed from a friend and smoothed a stray strand of blonde hair behind her ear. Her badge for the day read Lena Hart, Heartline Security in crisp black letters. Underneath her name, in smaller font, was the word bitter. You look like you belong here, Emily whispered beside her. You look like my lawyer, Lena whispered back. Emily snorted softly. Her blonde hair was pinned back neatly, her dress pressed. The lines around her eyes looked a little less tired these days. A clerk led them into a large hearing room, a long table for presenters, rows of chairs, and a raised dais where a panel of officials sat with tablets and paper copies. On one side of the room, the Cole Systems delegation had gathered, dark suits, branded folders, the easy posture of people used to being the default choice. Jackson stood among them, talking quietly with Harper and another executive. He looked older than the last time Lena had seen him in his office, more silver at his temples, a deeper line between his brows. His tie was still perfect. As the Heartline team walked in, Lena, Emily, and a single junior engineer they'd managed to hire last month, Jackson's gaze flicked their way. For a moment, their eyes met.
There was no smirk this time.
No trace of the man who'd once asked if she'd ever seen a keyboard outside a display case. Just a quiet, searching look and a small nod. Lena returned the nod, nothing more. Her heartbeat was steady in a way that surprised her. This is it, Emily murmured. Big leagues. Lena took her seat at the front table. Their entire presentation fit in a thin folder and a small laptop. Across the aisle, Cole Systems had stacked binders. A woman at the center of the panel cleared her throat. We'll begin. She consulted her agenda. Cole Systems, you're up first. Jackson rose. His presentation was polished, practiced. Slides detailed architecture, failover plans, layers of monitoring. He spoke about resilience, national threats, the cost of downtime. It was good. It was the kind of good that came from doing this for years. Then came the parts that twisted Lena's stomach, the optional modules for behavioral prediction, the integration with existing data partnerships, the cheerful assurance that privacy is a top priority, while the diagrams showed pipes connected to everything. Panel members asked about safeguards. The answers were smooth: compliance frameworks, oversight committees, user audits. Lena heard what wasn't being said as loudly as what was. After an hour, Coal Systems wrapped up. "Thank you," the chairwoman said. "Heartline Security." Lena stood. Her knees didn't wobble. That felt like a win. She plugged in her laptop. The first slide came up: no logo animation, no stock photos. Just a simple diagram. "Madam Chair, members of the panel," she began. "My name is Lena Hart. I grew up in a one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that appears in your reports mainly when something goes wrong." A few heads turned up at that. "Infrastructure doesn't just mean steel and wires," she said. "It means trust. People need to know the systems meant to protect them aren't quietly weighing their faces and browser history to decide if they're trouble." She walked them through Heartline's proposal: a lean architecture focused on critical infrastructure only, power grids, water utilities, transportation control systems. Strong encryption, minimal data retention, no predictive personal scoring. Where Coal Systems' proposal uses broad data ingestion to anticipate risk, she said carefully, ours focuses on minimizing the attack surface and hardening the systems that keep the country running. We're not trying to predict human behavior. We're trying to keep bad code out of the pipes. One of the panelists frowned slightly. "But without behavioral signals, aren't you limiting your ability to preempt threats?" "Yes," Lena said simply. "We're limiting our ability to preempt some threats in order to avoid creating new ones. Any system powerful enough to predict behavior is powerful enough to punish the wrong people when it's used badly, and history suggests it will be." The room went very quiet. She showed them a simplified version of Heartline's dashboard: clear, auditable logs, alert thresholds, a built-in transparency report generator. "Our design assumption is not that everyone using this system will be ethical," she concluded. "Our design assumption is that at some point, someone won't be. So we've built in friction, visibility, and hard limits instead of back doors you promise you'll never open." When she finished, she realized she was breathing a little harder. The chairwoman leaned forward, fingers steepled. "Miss Hart," she said, "you left Coal Systems last year, correct?" "Yes." "Reason?" Lena hesitated for only a second. This was on record. It would follow her. "I was asked to lead a project that I believed would harm more people than it helped," she said. "We had different definitions of acceptable risk." One of the other panelists glanced at Jackson. "Mr. Cole?" He didn't look away from Lena. "She declined a leadership role," he said. "We disagreed."
She resigned.
That's the short version. "Do you have any comment on her description?" the panelist pressed. Jackson's jaw flexed. His eyes were tired. "I think Miss Hart and I see the world differently," he said. "That difference is clearly reflected in these proposals." It was the closest thing to an admission she'd ever heard him give. The panel broke for deliberation, leaving the room buzzing softly as people checked phones and muttered in corners. Lena sat back down. Emily squeezed her hand under the table. "You did good," Emily whispered. "Whatever happens, you did good." Lena nodded, staring at the grain of the wood. Her stomach was a knot. Winning would change everything. Losing would change nothing and still hurt. When the panel returned, everyone stood. The chairwoman shuffled her papers, then looked up. "Thank you for your patience," she said. "We've reviewed the proposals, considered the technical merits, cost, and long-term implications." Lena's pulse thudded in her ears. In recognition of a design that prioritizes core resilience, minimizes civil liberty risks, and remains adaptable without overreach. The chairwoman said, "We are awarding the contract to Heartline Security." For a second, Lena thought she'd misheard. Then Emily's hand tightened convulsively around hers, and the junior engineer on her other side let out a choked, disbelieving laugh. Across the aisle, a small wave of whispers went through the Cole Systems group. Harper's face went slack. The legal guy stared at the table. Jackson didn't react at first. Then his shoulders dropped, just slightly, like someone had taken a weight off and replaced it with something heavier. "Congratulations, Miss Hart," the chairwoman said. "We look forward to working with you." "Thank you," Lena managed. Her voice sounded far away. She turned, almost on instinct, to look at Jackson. He met her gaze. There was no anger there, no outward bitterness, just a tired, rueful half-smile and something like acceptance in his eyes. He inclined his head a fraction. She did the same. For the first time, it felt like two equals acknowledging each other across a room. The fallout hit Cole Systems fast. Within weeks, articles popped up. Cole Systems loses landmark contract. Ethics questions surround legacy proposal. Upstart Heartline Security lands big win. Stock prices slid. Board members gave tight-lipped quotes about restructuring and new directions. Lena didn't follow every headline, but she saw enough to know that Jackson was stepping down as CEO to focus on new ventures. A polite phrase that meant pushed. Emily read the articles with a strange mix of satisfaction and pity. Man builds tower, then finds out he was standing on mud, she muttered one morning, pouring coffee. "Feels weird," Lena admitted. "I wanted to beat him. I just didn't think about what it would look like when it actually happened." "Sometimes winning feels like losing something too," Emily said. "Doesn't mean it wasn't the right win." Heartline moved into a bigger office, still modest, but with actual separate rooms and windows that didn't rattle. They hired 3 more engineers. They installed their systems, wrote documentation, argued over naming conventions. Life didn't become easy, exactly. Just fuller. A few months into the contract, on a gray afternoon thick with drizzle, the new receptionist buzzed Lena's office. "Hey, Lena," she said. "There's a man here asking for you. Says his name is Jackson Cole." The old version of Lena, the girl in the hoodie, the fellow with the badge, might have jumped. The woman at the desk now just exhaled slowly. "Is my mother up front?" she asked. "Yeah," the receptionist said. "She was dropping off lunch. She, stepped in when he came through the door." "Of course she did," Lena murmured. "Tell them I'm in a meeting." She hung up and walked quietly down the hallway until she reached the corner that opened into the small lobby.
She stopped just out of sight.
Emily stood between the reception desk and the chairs, arms crossed. Jackson sat on one of the chairs, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. His suit was still good, but not the flawless statement pieces he used to wear. There was more gray in his hair. He looked tired in a way that no tailor could fix. "I didn't come to ask for anything," he was saying. His voice sounded worn. "I know I have no right to. I wanted to see her, to tell her I'm proud of what she's built, to say I'm sorry where she can hear it and decide what to do with that herself." "You're saying it to me," Emily replied. "That'll have to be enough." He let out a short, humorless breath. "You're still the gatekeeper." "I'm still the one who was there," Emily said. "When the heater broke. When she cried over math homework. When she stayed up all night with that old laptop because she was too angry at the world to sleep." He stared at the floor. "I know," he said. "I know in the abstract, at least. I'll never really know, because I wasn't there. And that's on me. Silence stretched. When we lost that contract, he said quietly, my board finally said what they'd been thinking for years. That I was too stubborn to change, too proud to listen. They weren't wrong. Losing to her, he shook his head, a faint, astonished smile crossing his face. It hurt, and it was the first pain in a long time that felt like it belonged to me. Emily watched him, expression unreadable. I sold the penthouse, he went on. I'm starting something smaller. No sentinels. No predictive anything. Just trying to build useful tools without convincing myself they're saving the world. His mouth twitched. Took me long enough to learn the difference. And you want a medal? Emily asked. No, he said. I don't know what I want. He looked up at her. She doesn't need me, he said. I see that now. She never did. You two built a life without me. Then she built a company that beat me. He laughed once softly. That's about as clear as the universe gets. Emily's gaze softened, just a fraction. So, why are you here? She asked. Because I ruined enough, he said. I figured the least I could do was show up once without trying to fix anything. Just to say, I see you. I see her. I'm sorry. His voice broke on the last word. It was quiet enough that Lena could hear the receptionist discreetly pretending to type. Emily breathed out slowly. You know what the funny thing is? She said.
For years, I imagined this.
You showing up broke and sorry, asking for another chance. In those fantasies, I got to throw a drink in your face. A corner of his mouth twitched. Feel free. I probably deserve it. Emily shook her head. I'm too old to waste a good drink. They both almost smiled. Then Emily's face settled. Here's the reality, she said. Lena is doing fine. Better than fine. She has a company, a contract, a life she built on her own terms. She has scars because of you, whether she knows it or not, but she also has strength that grew in the space you left. He nodded, jaw tight. You showing up now, Emily continued, even with good intentions, risks ripping everything open again so you can feel what? Less haunted? More forgiven. He didn't answer. She doesn't owe you that, Emily said. And I'm not going to invite more ghosts into her office just because you finally hear chains rattling. He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, there was resignation there, and something like relief, as if he'd expected worse. Will you at least tell her, he asked, that I came and that I said I was sorry? Not as her father, just as the man who once laughed at her and then watched her surpass him in every way that mattered. Emily considered him. I'll tell her you came, she said. What she does with that is up to her. He nodded. Slowly, he pushed himself to his feet. Thank you, he said, for raising her, for everything. Emily's throat bobbed. I didn't do it for you. I know, he said. He turned toward the door. From her hiding place around the corner, Lena watched his back as he walked out into the drizzle. He looked smaller than he ever had on magazine covers. Just a man in a coat, shoulders slightly hunched, stepping into a world that no longer bent around his name. For a fleeting second, she thought about calling out, about letting him see her, letting him say the words he'd brought like an armful of wilted flowers. She stayed where she was. When the door closed behind him, she stepped into the lobby. Emily turned, surprised. How much did you hear? Enough, Lena said. Emily searched her face. Do you want to talk about it? Lena thought about the girl in the faded hoodie, the old laptop on the milk crate, The way Jackson had looked when she dropped her badge on his desk, the look in his eyes just now. "Not today," she said. "Maybe someday. Or maybe not." Emily nodded slowly. "That's your choice." Lena slipped her arm through her mother's. "What I do want," she said, "is that lunch you brought. And then I have 3 meetings about this infrastructure rollout because apparently we're a big deal now." Emily smiled, proud and aching all at once. "Yes, ma'am, Miss CEO." They walked back down the hallway together, past glass offices where Heartline employees tapped at keyboards, laughed over whiteboards, argued over code. In Lena's office, the window looked out over a slice of Seattle skyline, smaller than the view from coal systems, but clear and hers. She set her hand on the glass. Once, she had stood on the other side of the city, holding a folder she was afraid would vanish, listening to a billionaire laugh at her clothes. Now, she stood in her own space, with her own name on the door, the woman who'd raised her by her side. Somewhere out there, Jackson Cole was walking through rain with regret for company. He would keep building things or not. He would learn or not. That was his story to carry. Hers was here. "Ready?" Emily asked. Lena turned back to her desk, to the plans strewn across it, to the work she had chosen. "Yeah," she said. "Let's get back to it." The poor-looking girl who had walked into a tech interview and stunned a room had become the woman who built a company that rewrote the rules. The billionaire who had laughed at her had, in the end, run out of ways to spend his power. But the line she'd drawn, the one between who she was and who he'd tried to make her, held. And for Lena Hart, that was worth more than any apology in the world.